very careful about adding storage to those trusses, which are never meant to hold it. If you have a collection of pool noodles or something, you might be okay, but anything like any building materials, I would definitely not put up there.
So the answer to his question is horrible, crushing death.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Kiley Jacques, GBA Editor.
Hello.
Rob Wadsack, Digital Brand Manager.
Morning.
And Jeff Rose, Super Duper Producer.
Hi there.
You always get the best introduction.
Is it bad that I said morning? Because not everybody's listening to us in the morning. So.
That's true.
Well, no one's going to be confused by our lack of sharpness. You know what I'm saying? It's good you get that right out there, Rob.
Besides,
Okay.
you still have your breakfast in your teeth, so.
Yep.
Do you?
No, I'm just giving them a hard time.
Oh my God. So I've been seeing pictures of your window, Rob, on Facebook and Slack and all the other media channels we now have to monitor. How's it going? Do you still have a hole in your kitchen?
No. Well, first let me say thanks, Patrick, for, forcing me to look like I had no memory of the last time we recorded a podcast, because I think it was twice now that you've said, hey, let's see your new window. And I'm like, wait, didn't we talk about this already?
That's like with my Ryobi mower.
Yeah.
I was bringing that up. I think we've covered it.
It's Groundhog Day. So,
Well, you have to excuse me if I don't always pay attention to what you're
We
saying.
have a lot to remember.
So I finally have a bona fide remodeling project to talk about at my house. You saw that I tore the cabinets off, obviously.
Can we talk about the disgusting insulation right away?
Yes. So, of course, so my house was remodeled about 40 years ago, at least the kitchen was. And so it's that yellow fiberglass insulation. And it just does not go well with the color of black 150-year-old dirt.
It kind of had zebra stripes, I observed.
Particularly nauseating.
Yeah. It's so I expected that. I've torn apart so many old houses that I know what's. There were no surprises in the wall. I basically saw exactly what I hoped I would see.
A mummified mouse?
I expected that, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was surprised I only found one. But he was pretty mummified too, right?
Oh my God. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that freaking mouse.
So at the edges of the studs and at the edges of the clapboards on the outside, there was a perfect pitch black line of dirt in the fiberglass insulation.
We should tell folks you don't have sheathing on your house. You have clapboards nailed right to the framing, right? Your house is of a period where it's not exactly a timber frame and it's not exactly a stick frame, right?
Yeah, I'll describe the whole wall assembly in this kitchen. Basically, this house was built to breathe through the walls.
Like gills.
Yeah, so they, the old house had clapboards on it with no sheathing. It had corner braces it's a sort of almost like a hybrid timber frame, because it's that period when they were switching from timber frame houses to balloon framed houses. And so the corner braces do all the work of keeping the house from racking. So they don't bother with sheathing. They just nail the clapboards right over the true 2x4 rough sawn studs. And then sometime in the 80s, the previous owners put that half-inch of foil-faced foam over the top of that and nailed on the vinyl siding. On the inside, especially in this room, it's a problem because the kitchen, they didn't bother taping all the seams in the drywall because they're like, hey, they're going to get covered with
no one's going to see this because it's going to be behind cabinets.
So in this room, it's like, and there's no easy way to deal with that unless you tear cabinets off the walls or unless you tear the siding off the outside. So I'm doing a little bit of both. And so
how are you transitioning? Are you putting sheathing on?
Yes. So
how are you hiding the discrepancy in the wall plane with the additional sheathing?
Well, honestly, if I had just chosen to do sheathing, it wouldn't have been an issue because I got some nice thin sheathing that really was about the same exposure as the clapboards. So if I rip the clapboards off, the sheathing ends up being in plane. So you don't have to worry about that. But me being a little bit more ambitious and
creative.
Yeah, creative. I decided to do on this one wall a exterior rock wool insulation detail. So I built the window framing for this new big kitchen window that I doubled the size of the window over my kitchen sink. I built the framing out of 2x6s, and I even had to bump them out a little bit further than flush with the inside studs to allow for the thickness of the sheathing, then 1.5 inches of rock wool, then furring strips, and then I'm going to put plank siding over that. I'm going to put vertical pine siding. Now that may sound strange to do on my vinyl sided house, but this is against a patio on the back of my house, a stone patio that we like to hang out at, and my grill is out exposed to the weather. My back stoop does not have a roof over it. So what I'm planning on doing is building a 6-foot deep roof, the whole width of the back of the house, that will cover the stoop, cover where our gardening supplies are, and cover where my grilling station is.
What's the time frame for that part of the project, Rob?
I'm just full steam ahead.
You're going to keep going? Yeah.
Full steam ahead. I mean, I got to at least put the ledger in and flash everything in order to do the siding details below. So basically, I'm just going to work my way up from the bottom. I've got to put some material over the sill. I might even experiment with some rock wool and cement board over the stone foundation below the sill, just because I've always been curious about trying to make a detail like that work. So I might do.
How would you air seal the insulation of the fieldstone?
Well, that's the thing, is that I might have to parge the fieldstone, then put the rock wool over that, then do metal flashing tucked under the edge of the sill over the rock wool to separate it from the sheathing above. I don't know. That's sort of still not totally on the boards yet, but.
So where are you at presently with the exterior and interior? Is your family mad at you yet for tearing their kitchen apart? Well,
other than the fact that everybody's sniffling a lot from all of the 150-year-old dust that's in the house. I mean, I did a pretty good job of keeping the job site clean as I was doing it. But I mean, there was a 5-foot by 5-foot hole in the side of my wall, and the studs were all exposed. So and it was even open, since it's balloon framing, to the floor system above, which is full of dirt. And so basically where we're at now is the inside is still open. I still have to put rock wool insulation in between the studs on the inside. The window is framed. The window was installed. It's a nail flange window. I taped it to that buck that I built out of the 2x6s that sticks out of the wall. I kind of did some makeshift Tyvek for now, just to protect everything until I get everything really buttoned up on the whole wall. And I took Matt's recommendation, and I just used CDX plywood for the sheathing, because it's vapor open with there's a lot of impermeable layers on the inside of the wall in my kitchen, and there will be, especially if I do a tile backsplash. So this wall is designed to breathe to the outside. And I just use zip tape to tape all the seams of the plywood, so that's the air barrier, and the WRB will be a separate layer of house wrap over the top of that.
Oh boy, this is like real construction.
This is really fun stuff. Yeah.
This is awesome.
It's always interesting to me when one wall is so drastically different from the others. Do you have any performance related concerns there?
It's like I remember.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but Kiley, so your worry is that because Rob has made this much improved wall assembly,
right?
Is that going to have any implications for the rest of the house?
Well, almost like it's all for naught if the rest of it is a big leaky sieve.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I think we've touched on this before. It's kind of similar to when you do energy modeling for a house. A lot of times you choose the amount of glazing based on the surface area of the different R values of insulation that you can get. And so you just kind of have to find a compromise. Sometimes you reduce some glazing, sometimes you add some insulation to get sort of the average overall surface area to the R value that you want to get it to.
So do you feel like you need to start punching holes in other walls and doing...
Oh yeah, I'm going to keep working my way around the
house. It's just going to lead to more work, right?
But one thing...
Wait, Rob, you also said that the kitchen was the least comfortable room in your house, right? So it makes sense to make it better.
Yes. Yeah. So even though I don't have plans to build the roof all the way around the next corner of the house because my kitchen is an L, so there's 2 walls exposed to the outside. I'm still going to work my way around the corner ultimately, and I'll just have to find some sort of architectural detail to, or maybe I'll even continue that roof around the corner and have a place to keep my gardening, like
I
my
think
wheelbarrow
just a yellow line painted on the side of the house. Like,
yeah, exactly. But one thing that, to Kiley's point before, though, is that I'm building this super insulated wall, or at least compared to what I had
the rest
before.
of the house, yeah.
Matt also suggested make sure you put fire blocking in, because I've got this balloon framed wall. Mm-hmm. Now I've got a lot of different materials in there. Well, I mean, just in general, anytime you have an opportunity to add fire safety to the house, it's a good idea. But I went one step further. I pitched the fire blocking at the top of the wall, because I opened up the wall up to the floor system above. I pitched the fire blocking out, and I took some WRB material and ran it over the top of the fire blocking, down over the sheathing, before I put the next piece of sheathing above that.
Oh, that is pretty smart, Rob. Did you come up with that detail yourself?
I've always thought about that when there's so many parts of this house that connect with air passages or moisture passages to other parts of the house, that anytime I do a major insulation job in one wall, I make sure that I isolate that wall from moisture and air from the adjacent surfaces.
Well, here's something awesome. So we've coined some phrases on the show, right? The greedy dormer being overtrucked. I think we have WhatsApp blocking. This is the newest thing.
Love it.
WhatsApp blocking.
One last note on your house too, just in terms of occupant comfort. Your house is so divided up. I mean, you have like so many rooms, and your kitchen is quite small. So I imagine having done what you did in the kitchen and it being so sort of, it's separate, cozy, that you're going to really feel a difference despite not having done anything else in the rest of the house.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, both in comfort and in just the enjoyment of the space. I mean, taking those 2 cabinets out and putting in that double-sized window, we'd have a sort of a peek at our garden in the back. And my wife's a serious gardener, and we have lots of beautiful plants right outside the window. And we could never enjoy them because there were very small windows in the back of the house. And one thing I really noticed is that, on an old house, you typically have windows that are vertical because they're double hung windows. So they don't frame views.
Yeah, it's not a landscape orientation, quite literally.
You now have the ideal picture window, so to speak. I mean, it literally looks like a frame.
Well, so many people, because I shared some pictures of it with some friends, so many people, when they first saw the photo, thought it was a framed painting on the wall.
Yeah, I can see why they thought that. That's a testament to Michelle's
You need some gold casing, dude.
Someone suggested that.
I love it.
We're actually considering it. We're actually considering painting the molding to look like a picture frame.
I love it.
Jeff, what have you been doing?
Mostly been working outside. When I was working I lost those trees in the front yard, it sort of, again, spiraled out of control because I had the stuff out. It's like, well, let me trim these branches that I keep having to duck under when I mow the lawn, which led to, well, let's clear the underbrush underneath these trees.
It's a very slippery slope landscaping, right?
It is.
Yeah. You do one thing and then you're like, oh, this other stuff looks like crap.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, it's good to be outside, right? Because, yeah.
And then the other night, my refrigerator started making some noise. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah. That turned out to be a simple problem, though. I was just the condenser fan.
So you just replaced the fan and you're good to go? Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Isn't it great that stuff is so easy to get now? Part of the problem used to be you couldn't get parts for appliances easily.
Yeah, it was delivered on Sunday on a holiday weekend.
Huh. That's fantastic. Wow. So was that some poor postal worker who brought that?
Yep.
Yeah. They're the only ones who seem to be delivering packages on Sunday unless you pay a fortune.
Yeah.
Kiley, what have you been doing?
Let's see. The other day we recorded a show. The BS and Beer show has started we're going to begin a book club. And so the hosts of the show are now reading Bruce King's The New Carbon Architecture. And so we subdivided the chapters and each of us to do a little video teaser, talked about the different materials featured in the book. And I was lucky enough to land with plastics and the discussion there.
What a great fit.
It's sort of to underscore possibilities, and it's actually quite fascinating. There's so much to know about plastics. But
so, are there promising plastics technology on the horizon?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but there are some interesting ideas about harvesting existing plastics in the environment. But the whole point was, by the time we got done talking about plastics and concrete and straw, it all came down to wood. And, we all love wood, and it's so tried and true. And Travis was talking about that, and, advances being made there in terms of CLT construction. But anyway, as we got off the show, I walked by my tap floor, and I want to give a shout out to whoever it was back in the day that suggested I go get a slab of bowling alley, because
it was a podcast listener. I'm sure.
It was a podcast listener.
Yeah.
I just want to thank him because it has such a beautiful sound, and I get a lot of pleasure out of it during this quarantine time. I'm in a creative phase, and that has brought me a lot of joy. And I just wanted to thank that person.
And reconstituted milk jugs would not have the same appeal. Am I right?
The beauty of wood. That's my takeaway.
I think wood is a fantastic building material. Low embodied energy.
Exactly.
It's local. It's
local.
very resource efficient material. How could you disagree?
And you know what?
Are you going to talk some more? Can I talk?
I know,
no,
right?
you can't. You know what? There's so much wood out there that's ready to be salvaged. I mean, I hate to see old buildings getting torn down, but Facebook Marketplace is a wonderful thing. I've been getting a lot of materials for cheaper, and you're getting to reuse stuff at the same time.
Always great to use stuff that's already made, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I can tell you guys the generator saga, I think, has come to a fruitful end. I put the transfer switch all back together, but before I did so, I did a continuity test on every circuit, both line voltage and generator voltage, and it passed with flying colors, so I hooked it back up, and everything works. The generator starts on the first pool, so finally a happy ending, and the end result will be I'll never use it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Did you contact the manufacturer and let them know that you had these issues?
I did not, but I'm hoping there's a podcast listener that has it in there at Reliance Controls who can express my displeasure.
I think
I was
strongly
worried about
advise you to do
someone
that.
losing their job if I made a big stink about it, So everybody makes mistakes. It was easy to fix. I was a little scared to do it, but sometimes you just have to try stuff, right, Rob?
Yep. And make sure you get lots of fire extinguishers and leave them all around the house.
If anybody out there has experience with generator power and arc fault circuit interrupter breakers, I would like to know your experience, because it seems mine don't work with the generator. So I was going to swap them out for normal breakers, but don't tell anybody. This makes sense, right? It's a different kind of power. It seems less clean than line power.
Yeah.
So you guys, I got to do something very exciting this week. I drove to Cape Cod, which was exciting in itself. It was absolutely gorgeous day. But I got to see Ross McPherson of New England Air Barrier do an aero barrier install. So this is the second one, and Ross has done enough of these to have learned some stuff to not make a mess in new homes with the aero barrier ceiling material. So he's refined the process enough that they're not blowing as much material in there, which saves him resources and prevents the accumulation on flat surfaces, which this stuff does do. But it was super interesting, and that's going to be an article in the magazine. We're going to tell everybody the ins and outs of aero barrier so you get a better job. And Ross is the first to admit this process is not right for every project, but boy, it sure holds a lot of promise for competent builders who want an easy way to meet the air tightness requirements that are in the IRC currently. So if you're building a pretty good house to begin with, this is a super easy way to get there in a few hours time max. It's pretty great.
Is it expensive?
Well, so for the right builder, it's probably going to save them money over the time they would spend doing air sealing with conventional methods. So it depends, Kiley. It depends what your goals are and how you're air sealing your homes presently.
And what sort of a house was he working on?
So this was a 3,000 square foot single family dwelling. My guess it was probably on a quarter acre, $1.7 million.
Okay.
It wasn't super fancy. It's just where it is. Chatham, Massachusetts, in this, the middle of the Cape. And especially now when everyone wants a house in the country, I suspect these suckers are going fast. I suspect it's a lot of people with money in Boston who are buying these as second homes or even primary residences now.
Yeah.
But it was a nice house, but boy, it kind of shocked me how expensive it was. What would you have guessed?
Oh, yeah. At Cape Cod, I wouldn't expect anything to be under $1 million if it's a nice house.
Yep. It's all where you are. Should we get to some feedback?
We better.
I know.
Over.
Oh my God, it is. Okay, this comes from Doug. Hi all, after hearing the dire warning in 279 about sweating copper, I felt I had to write in. In 1983, I was contemplating a total gut remodel of our second floor bath. I talked to my neighbor who was a licensed plumber and owned a small plumbing supply store about doing the job. He convinced me I could do it myself. The job included new supply, waste, and vent lines. When teaching me how to sweat copper, he said there were 4 important things. Clean the copper properly, use OD solder and OD paste, and don't burn off the flux. I bought all the pipe and fittings from him, and he came over regularly to inspect my work. We lived there for 25 years with no problems. Having said all that, when I built our new home, I went with PEX except for the copper I needed to build the tub/shower manifolds. I much prefer PEX. One last bit of historical trivia. Before the fireproof safety fabric was developed, it was common to just buy a roll of asbestos paper. I kind of want a roll of asbestos paper just for posterity, right? He says, I also thought about The Great Escape when you were discussing the new footings under that home in California. Stay safe, Doug.
I didn't understand that reference. I mean, I know what The Great Escape is.
Tunneling underneath that house.
So this guy needs to
go
go in his 18-inch crawl space to replace some piers. This comes from Doug Horgan. Doug is our friend. He's the vice president of best practices at BOA. BOA is a very respected remodeling firm in the Washington, D.C. Area. He said, I love the podcast as usual, and I'm glad to see we're focusing on air sealing again. We've used a fair amount of spray foam, and generally speaking, I don't see it shrink away from framing. We are still crawling around the attics we foamed a decade or more ago, and I usually keep an eye out for this kind of thing. We do see foam fail early, like the same week, or when we mess up the application process. In particular, before we knew better, we would sometimes spray cold surfaces, or worse, cold surfaces we were trying to warm up with propane heaters inside an unfinished house. Spraying cold substrates, I've read, causes multiple issues with foam, including poor adhesion, bad mixing, and incomplete chemical reactions. Spraying cold sheathing 2 hours after you fired up a propane heater in the space adds another issue and is much worse. You can leave the explanation for that as a puzzler for next week if you want, or you can call me. Bottom line, winter spraying is tough and an electric heater or other method is needed. Foam has sometimes failed quickly without us doing dumb things with cold surfaces. I assume the ratio of the 2 parts was off or something about the chemicals went bad. We once had an entire wall of foam shrink so much it ripped into small pieces a couple of days after install. As far as air sealing goes, spray foam usually does a pretty good job, but we often, nearly always, find an area that we missed, especially in complicated remodels. We use a thermal camera to quality check the foam the day after it's sprayed, and there are usually a lot of little misses and often a big one. Overall, my experience is foam not adhering is pretty unusual, and my guess is there's a specific reason for most cases. It's still an expensive and risky material that I'm not super enthusiastic about, but I can't seem to find a great alternative for it in some scenarios. Doug, that is fantastic feedback. So cold surfaces seem like a problem.
This puts me in mind with, I'd like to give a little plug for a really interesting Q&A article. Scott Gibson is now doing these Q&A spotlight blogs on Green Building Advisor. And there's one called The Case of the Missing Spray Foam. And there's some really interesting, this guy essentially, he had his attic spray foamed and it was closed cell and there's all this shrinkage. And it led to a really interesting discussion that people might enjoy. He essentially needed to know, like, did I get my money's worth? And the answer was no. You need to
things go bad sometimes, right? That's the point. And apparently, according to Doug, and I've heard it from others, spraying cold surfaces is especially risky.
Why is it particularly risky if it's a cold surface and you're trying to heat the surface?
I don't know, but I'm sure curious.
I have an idea, but I don't know if you want me to wait till next week to talk about it.
Do you think it's carbon dioxide, Rob?
I actually think it's moisture from burning the propane.
I think it might be that too. Do you think that so polyurethane foams are moisture cured? Do you think it makes it cure too quickly? Is this your hypothesis?
Either that, or you're getting too much moisture on the surface, so you're not spraying against a dry surface.
So you have moisture from the propane heater condensing on the cold surface?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see who's right. I'm curious. I bet Doug will let us know. Whew, that's good stuff. Mm-hmm. The reason to listen to this show, people, is the smart people we have on it.
Not us.
Not us. Yeah, so my computer locked up, which is super helpful, Microsoft. Thank you. I love it.
Right.
Microsoft applications. If anyone from Microsoft listens to this show, you people really need to get your act together.
Amen.
It's like your programs do things people do not expect. And the things that they try to do to help you, they're not helpful.
It is a struggle that you and I alone endure.
Oh, I don't think we're alone, Kiley.
On our team.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think we're the only people. All right, so let's get to some questions here. This comes from Nils in Southern California. Hello, podcast friends. Longtime listeners since about the podcast 50 or so. Loving the current generation. Here's a question on the verge of several disciplines. Design, tile, plumbing, at least. I'm an experienced DIY/property owner and manager, and I'm really redoing our personal master bath. Curbless showers are all the rage these days, and Schluter's offerings make it look simple so far. I've done several standard bathroom models myself, but never a curbless shower. The window is at the far end of a 65-inch wall with a skylight above. We would love a freestanding tub below for looks, and based on the dimensions, it would have to go along this wall, accessing it by stepping through the shower door in front. I can easily get the minimum size for the shower pan by doing it this way. Drainage should be a linear drain dividing the space. Everything looks easy peasy until I start to consider how waterproofing a freestanding tub in a wet room would work. I gather that many tubs have some combination of caulking and mechanical anchors to hold them in place, but at a minimum, the drain penetration has to be waterproof. I don't see guidelines anywhere. Let's say I get that sorted out. How any potential seepage leaks handled underneath the tub? I'd prefer not to merely hope water never leaks under that joint. Is it appropriate to slope the floor under the tub to promote drainage? Help or suggestions. I have to imagine there are good details for this setup since I see pictures of it all over the Pinterest, Instagram, and other places. This application is over our recently remodeled kitchen, and I'm sure my wife would hate to have shower water dripping onto us while we are cooking. Cheers from pleasant Southern California. Nils. Rob, have you built houses with this detail?
I have not built houses with this detail, but I will mention something that I think is sort of related. Whenever I install a toilet, we know that certain plumbers will recommend that you don't actually caulk the toilet to the floor because, I don't know, well, I think you're supposed to, but anyway, I don't caulk the toilet to the floor. What I do is if it's a tile floor, I do a really good job of caulking with a high quality caulk or silicone to the toilet flange, bridging to the tile, so that if any water does get underneath there, it's not going to go down into the sheathing. Anytime anyone's ever ripped up a toilet, you find rotted sheathing.
It's freaking disgusting down there every time. Yeah.
It's nasty. I still don't know why we have wax seals and porcelain bowls.
I know. Can't we do better?
Yeah.
But so that's one thing. I think that sealing from the tile to the flange is a big way to avoid. It's kind of like that plumbing article we had recently about plumbing things that are designed so that you see the problem before it becomes too big. And so that by doing that, any water that's underneath the toilet, or in this case a tub, will leak out to the sides instead of into the floor system below. But another detail for tubs, especially freestanding tubs, is I saw this at IBS this year, and I seem to see it around the internet a lot, is these drop-in freestanding tub flanges where you have a pipe on the tub and you have a flange that has a rubber flexible gasket in it so that you can actually drop the tub right into the flange. So that way you can do the same kind of installation you would do with a toilet, where you're sealing the flange well to the floor or tile or whatever you've got there, and any water that gets underneath there is only going to be able to make it into that flange and down the drain.
What do you think, Kiley?
I don't know. I was looking around trying to find something related.
Do you think this is a good idea intuitively?
I don't know. The point that I was a little stuck on and I can't visualize is he said you access the tub through the shower.
So maybe it's like an alcove, like a space behind the shower. Because a lot of these curbless showers are basically open spaces in the bathroom. So
true. Right. It's a wet room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the other thing to do is what he was asking about, I believe, is just put enough pitch in the floor.
Yeah.
So that everything's draining towards the shower.
What about the penetration that he's referring to, the drain penetration? Does it matter like where it's draining to in terms of how he approaches it?
You mean the shower drain, Kiley?
Yeah, because isn't that what he's trying to
You want to get that as far away from the tub, right, as possible.
No. Anyway, maybe I'm misunderstanding what he's after here, but I thought that part of his concern was waterproofing, like the drain penetration has to be waterproofed. Is he referring to the tub?
Yeah, he's talking about when you've got a freestanding tub, it's sitting on the floor, and the drain is underneath the tub. So
exactly. So does it matter where that's going? And I mean, he's specifically asking, how am I going to seal that? So does the direction in which it's moving determine his course of action?
Not where the drain is draining to itself, but the proximity of it to the shower area and whether or not there's any reason why water would want to move towards the tub from the shower area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I had a hard time deciphering this one.
So, you guys know I have trouble answering things that make no sense to me, right? I would just tell people not to do this because it is a hard thing to get right. Mm-hmm. And, so I've seen this, once again, this is the Doug Horgan show. Doug, has to deal with this detail. I said, so how do you deal with this? And he had a list of suggestions. I'll start with number 1. Keep the tub out. Come on, people.
Okay, 2.
2, set the tub on a small curb raised above the shower floor area, or at least at the high end of a significant slope to the drain. Unlike catalog photos showing curbless showers with like half an inch of total fall, we do our best to engineer a significant fall, more than an inch, in curbless showers. Otherwise, a simple and common hair clog can cause a multi-$1,000 flood restoration. So that's the whole part of this thing that doesn't make any sense to me, right? And people are gonna say, well, no one's gonna let their bathroom flood. Well, if you have teenagers, they're gonna let it flood. They're not gonna care. My friend's daughter and son let their tub not drain for weeks without telling him. Like a foot of water was in the tub when he went in there, and it said it was like the most disgusting thing, and no one ever mentioned it. So, I mean, that's not a solution either. He also says slope the waterproofing around the tub to keep it from running toward the tub's drain and supply line. The tile can be set level at the tub footprint. So what he's saying is take the waterproofing membrane and slope it, but then make the tile level by adding a thicker layer downslope than upslope of thin-set mortar, right, or some kind of mortar. He says use wall-mounted faucets rather than floor-mounted versions. At least put floor-mounted faucets as far from the shower area as you can on the other side of the tub from the shower. There's a Kohler floor-mounted rough-in that mounts below the floor level. That one should not be used in the splash area. It is super challenging to manage water. More traditional floor-mounted faucets have the connections above the tile. The rough connections can be sealed to the waterproofing layer with a reasonable expectation of success. Number 7, use some combination of sheet and goop waterproofing to create small turned-up curb and or seal directly to the pipes or rough-in fittings. He says duct-mounted tubs are actually even harder to deal with, generally speaking. Undermount slightly better, but keep the plumbing out of the deck. Wall mount again, if at all possible.
So you know what? number 7 there. It's number 7 reminds me of. That's like the pitch, the roof penetration that we were talking about a few years ago.
It very much is like the pitch pockets we were talking about.
Basically, before you put the actual finish part of the floor-mounted tub filler onto the fixture, he's saying basically build up some sort of waterproofing membrane up the slope of the fittings themselves so that if water does get underneath the flange of those fillers, it's not going to go into the floor. It's just going to hit a dam, basically.
I think all of Doug's advice is really good.
This is an article.
Especially number one.
Yeah. You know, those I do like the idea of one of these showers. I mean, it just seems kind of nice to have this a luxurious open space. It feels like some old Roman bath or something like that. But those and I do like the look of those linear drains. But I was watching someone put some of those linear drains allow you to tile right over the top of them. And we have a video of Josh Oden putting in a beautiful large format tile shower. And it looked beautiful. He had a really nice pitch to it. That the whole installation was sharp. But all I could think about was how often I have to clean my teenage daughter's hair out of the drain in my shower. And I'm like, how do you do that with one of those big linear drains?
Yeah.
You know, the genesis of me asking Doug this question was I was on a photo shoot for job site protection at one of his projects. And this very question came up because he was looking at the rough-in work around the bathtub supply lines. And he's like, boy, that looks kind of dodgy. We're going to have to get the tile setter back to fine-tune this waterproofing. And so that was why I decided to ask him about this because it's a problem, you know? And
it's interesting. These curbless showers are often part of an aging in place design plan. And I can't think in all of the baths that I've looked at where they have both a curbless shower and a freestanding tub. It seems like it makes sense. You want a tub and you want a shower, but I just haven't seen that very often.
Yeah, you see it a lot in the design magazines. I haven't seen it in person, though.
You know, what's wrong with a shower curb? Admittedly, you can't wheel your wheelchair into the shower, right? So a wheel-in shower makes a lot of sense in some instances, right? Mm-hmm. But I think for most people, just use a curb and make your life so much easier. Oh my gosh. I blame the design community for some of this because I think they could discourage people from this detail, but it does look amazing. And sometimes I, stay in hotel rooms that have it, and it's kind of cool, but it just seems like a headache, especially in a hotel where people behave badly.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, if you really want to break it down to making durable and simple and easy to care for houses, you talk about like Martin Holliday has that article saying, if you want a really easy and cheap and durable house, just build a simple box with a gable roof and make the details as simple as possible. But we all have these desires to have these unique homes. And so it's just a matter of finding the right compromise.
Mm-hmm. You're talking to Patrick, who lives in the most practical of houses. Puritan practical.
I don't know. I like simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like simple's hard to argue with.
I agree.
I love this question. So this came from Shane. Shane put in his email subject line, possible loft and pole barn or horrible crushing death?
I think that's my favorite question title yet.
Good morning, FHB. I hope this email finds you all well. I have a question, not air sealing, that I'm hoping you might be able to advise me on. My wife and I moved into our forever home about 3.5 years ago. It's a log cabin on 5 acres on the edges of the woods. I lucked out, and there is a 30 by 48 pole barn on the property that is going to be my wood shop / mechanic and eventual blacksmith shop. Sounds pretty awesome, Shane. Mm-hmm. I'm in the process of building a wood floor over a very thick bed of gravel, treated 2x6 sleepers on a 6 mil vapor barrier. But being the forward-looking individual that I am, I was thinking about building a smallish loft for storage, but I'm concerned that the bottom cord, 30-foot span of 2x4s with a splicing plate just left of dead center, isn't anywhere close to being sufficient. I was wondering if these rafters could be reinforced enough to hold some 3/4-inch plywood by adding 2 vertical supports connecting the top 2x6s and bottom cord and sistering 2x8s across the center sections of the bottom cord. I'll attach some pics to help explain what I'm talking about. What do you think? I tend to over-engineer most anything I build, but I'm not sure this is even worth trying. Thank you, Shane. All right, Rob, you got stuff stored in your rafters, I bet.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Okay, well, first, I just want to ask him if he's got room to build another little cabin on his property, because that barn is exactly what I want to have access to, even for the blacksmithing. So here's the thing. I've got a loft in my little 15 by 18 barn, and I've put a lot of crap up there that I thought I might use in projects someday. And it's been just up there for years. It's collecting dust and dirt and bird crap. And, but aside from that, he's got a big barn. He's got a lot of space in his property. If you want access to things that you're going to use, I would say keep them on the ground floor. But that's not just for access. Trusses are meant to be designed for the load that they're supposed to support. And the bottom cord of a truss like that was never intended to be
loaded that way. And no matter what, and the thing is, by reinforcing it with all the things that he's talking about, you might be changing the vectors on that, all the different loads on the different parts of that truss in ways that you can't predict how it's going to cause stress. And so I would say for two reasons. One, for convenience of storage, build a shed off the back of the building if you want to have more storage than you can fit in that room. But also, that sounds pretty darn risky to me. I mean, if you really were dead set on it, you didn't have the space to put storage anywhere else, I would say get an engineer or build a loft, frame it with some posts on the ground, build an actual structure. With its own load path, Rob.
Yes.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Put some posts and beams up like you're building an elevated deck on the outside of a house, but just put it inside.
I wonder how often people screw around with their trusses like that.
I'm sure all the time.
Yeah, because they look like they could handle so much.
Yeah, people don't realize that trusses are designed for very specific load paths.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my previous life as a building materials sales rep for a pro-oriented lumber yard is Vermont is a rural state, right? And so we bid a lot of truss packages for pole barns for farmers. And I can tell you, agricultural and storage pole buildings are very minimally built. They are meant to be cheap. They are not meant to be anything but as inexpensive as they can possibly be. So when you're adding loads that they were not meant to do is very risky. So at a minimum, get an engineer to tell you what you can do or can't do. This is not a question for us, but I would say be very, 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 very careful about adding storage to those trusses, which are never meant to hold it. If you have a collection of pool noodles or something, you might be okay. But anything like any building materials, I would definitely not put up there.
So the answer to his question is horrible, crushing death.
Yes.
Thank you for answering that definitively, Kiley.
That's what I'm here for.
And at least it'll probably do some damage to the nice cars or blacksmithing equipment that he has stored in there.
Can I remind people that you shouldn't be blacksmithing on a wood floor? Is that right, Rob? You cannot do that, right?
Well, I'm guessing that he's talking about his workshop area that he's going to put that wood floor in. I would hope that when it comes time to do blacksmithing or mechanic work, that he's going to pour a slab in a portion of that building. But one can only assume,
So our friend, the Essential Craftsman, his blacksmith shop is inside his workshop, and he just has a gravel floor. So Shane might want to just consider leaving part of that space gravel so he can do his smithing there later on, right?
What's the ideal floor for that? Gravel?
What's the ideal floor for that, Rob?
Oh, yeah. I mean, most blacksmith shops would have had a dirt floor, really.
Yeah.
But basically anything that's non-flammable. I mean, you think that gravel is pretty common, concrete, obviously. If you're going to be moving heavy stuff around, I would imagine you'd want a concrete floor because you're going to probably want carts and hand trucks and forklifts and things. But
moving carts over gravel is super fun.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jeff? Good advice there? Crushing death?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Never mess with a truss.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, podcast, previously known as the Roof Venting Podcast. You answered my question a few weeks ago about drywall versus drop ceiling for my basement finishing, and I wanted to say thank you for being the final push I needed to drywall the ceiling. I was leaning that way, but the electrician I've used for a sub-panel install had the expected concerns. A new topic for discussion around electrical permitting came up during the same project. I live in Maine in a town that does not allow owners to pull their own electrical permits, and without going into boring detail, I am fairly confident that I can run the simple circuits needed for my basement and be up to code. My question is around this decision from the town. Well, I would never even think of continuing to do, I mean, he means to say, I would never even think of beginning small wiring projects without a permit. This policy seems like a good way to push capable DIYers into just not bothering and not getting the benefit of the inspection to correct issues. I'm curious if there are any inspectors out there who have a different perspective, maybe have worked in communities with both policies, and something I'm not thinking of came up. I'm sure they don't like inspecting homeowners' work, like all inspectors, but this seems like a bad incentive and has no real upside. No capable owners will just continue using pros, and DIYers will just avoid the permitting process altogether. As I said, I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but unless code enforcement made a show of knocking on the front door of every person buying Romex from the box store and inspecting their Amazon boxes, I just don't see that as a real deterrent for small-scale projects. Even worse, not allowing for inspection of the work needing it most seems like doubling down on a bad scenario. Wow, what a great question. So, if you don't let DIYers pull electrical permits, will they do their own work perhaps dangerously as an alternative? Jeff, what do you think?
I would suspect that probably happens more often than not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good point.
Rob?
Yeah, I mean, you know that there are so many DIYers out there who don't bother to pull permits for any kind of work. And
I feel like I'm looking at 3 of them.
No, never.
Shut up. We're on the podcast.
But yeah, it's like you'd think that the people who are, as he pointed out, are less confident in their abilities and want to follow the rules or want to get someone to check their work, that, yeah, they would pull permits so that they know that they're doing their work properly. It does seem like
a disincentive.
Disincentive. I mean, the thing is, I guess the reasoning is that they don't trust them to be doing it in the first place, or don't want the liability of inspecting something that's not being done by a trained professional. I mean, I imagine some of this has to do with liability, because if these electrical inspectors are inspecting these people's work and it's extensive, I mean, the chances of you catching some weird little problem might be not so great. And then, are you liable if you inspected it and all of a sudden there's a problem?
I mean, maybe the whole idea is to disincentivize it. It just doesn't work. People are going to go ahead and do it anyway. But maybe the whole premise of it is to discourage them from doing these types of jobs. I don't know.
I think you're right, Kiley. I think that's very much the thing at work here is they don't want people trying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we all recognize that that's not going to stop people,
right?
Especially people who can't afford otherwise, right? Mm-hmm. If you can't afford an electrician and you need electrical work, you're going to take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't account for the DIYer.
I mostly worry about not people who want good information and want to try things themselves and then have it, either inspected or have their work supervised while they're doing it by an electrician. I worry more about people who think they know what they're doing who do not, because I've seen a lot of very bad electrical work in the years I've been remodeling houses, like buried electrical boxes, bad connections, arcing connections, ground wires missing, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yep. I found plenty of hanging loose live wires with just little scraps of electrical tape in my basement when I moved in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like kitchen remodels and bath remodels always seem to have weird wiring done by somebody who didn't have any business doing electrical wiring.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're in this situation, I would say try and find an electrician who will work with you, have them pull the permit. You do the work, they inspect it. They're going to charge you, I'm sure, for the convenience of this and the hassle of monitoring your work. My guess is they're going to charge you more if you're a disaster, less if you do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's going to be a number of electricians who are just going to say no way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to piss off electricians out there who don't want to deal with people who don't know what they're doing. But if you're lucky and you have an electrician that you know well, and they know that you're a person who's going to do the right thing and do decent work. I mean, I've worked with electricians before who at least let me do some of the prep work, opening up the walls, maybe even running a couple of wires. and then let them do all the connections. I mean, there's probably some ways you can save a little bit of money that way. But again, I don't want to piss off the electricians who are all of a sudden going to have all these inexperienced people asking them if they'll basically do half a job for them.
Mm.
I bet people ask them that all the time. I don't think that's going to be anything new, Rob.
Yeah.
I think there's probably, all tradespeople get asked to do things with DIYers involved. And I'm sure most of them want no part of that. But, I mean, it might make sense for the right person and the right contractor, right?
Yep.
I wouldn't want to work with you, Rob.
No? That seems odd because I feel like you have multiple times.
It's okay when you're lifting my windows, right?
Yeah, you helped me with my drywall in my attic too.
Bring the
Remember that?
brawn.
I was wanting to lift that window when you're into that hole for you, but I was glad Michelle did it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I felt like I might have been offending you by telling you that I didn't need your help.
No. Did you guys have any trouble with that?
Oh no, it wasn't that heavy. It was. I could pretty much lift it into position myself, and I just had the girls just hold it there while I was.
You went in and straightened it up.
Leveling it up, and yeah.
Cool. This comes from my friend Mark. Hey there, FH experts. Twice I've seen TimberTech trim boards applied to the band/rim joists covering the ends of the deck boards, so it's flush with the top of the deck boards. This would seem a suboptimal construction method. I live in the Hudson Valley of New York State, and we have an abundance of falling plant matter spring through fall. This plant matter, when small enough, works its way down between the applied fascia and first the deck board edge, and then between the framing and the fascia board. Then, of course, this gets saturated with water, and after a couple freeze-thaw cycles, you have this wavy effect, and more troubling, you have that nearly constant moisture held there against the back of the fascia and the face of the framing member. This seems like a recipe for disaster to me, and it would seem to be just get worse the larger the gap. In the current scenario, the homeowner asked me just to remove the fascia boards and then set them aside, which I did. I have looked around in the available info on the Weyerhaeuser site and cannot find specific instructions. I did find a picture where the deck boards are clearly shown capping and even slightly overlapping the fascia, which makes sense to me. Am I just seeing a lowball application by substandard contractors, or is this actually the recommended method of installation? Thanks in advance, Mark. Okay, so he's got a wood frame deck, and these composite decking manufacturers often make this kind of, he calls it a fascia board, I'd call it a skirt board, but it's a trim board, and you put it around the band joist to hide the ends of the deck boards. In the case of Mark's deck, these have a hollow back, which means they have grooves in them, so they're not meant to be exposed. They don't have a uniform cross-section like a normal deck board, right? So this contractor put these boards up to hide the ends of the board. And Mark's point is that, this is catching dirt and holding moisture there. And is it going to make the stuff rot and get moldy? And the answer is absolutely, because I saw the photos. It was starting to rot and be moldy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So there should be overhang, right? I mean, it seems.
Well, you could do that, or you could treat it like the same way you treat a wall, almost like do a rain screen kind of detail. I mean, anytime that I have gaps in decking on a deck, I make sure that there isn't solid framing underneath them, because how are you going to clean all the gunk that falls in there over time? So if you do smart framing or a smart decking layout, you could put some furring strips on the outside, vertical furring strips, and you could still do exactly the same detail these people did, but allow a space for that stuff to fall
like
through.
A little mini rain screen.
Exactly.
I saw a neat detail. It doesn't address this, but it seemed to suggest that there should be a bit of an overhang. But we have Fine Homebuilding has a nice story by or how to by David Tote, and it's actually really nice looking, and it's this fascia board, it's PVC board, and this little contrasting accent strip with mitered corners. It's pretty sharp, and it was applied.
Does it shed the water, Kiley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't shed it in terms of rain screen action. It just protects it. It's not shedding it. It's protecting it because there's a little bit of a lip from the top boards. So
what I like as a detail is I like a picture frame around the deck boards, and then you put that over the band joist and the fascia board, and all of a sudden you have a cap on top of there to keep the dirt and the water out. So I think that's another great solution. And try not to miter the corners, because every time I've done that, I've always been sorry, because they inevitably
they don't
just
stay.
open up.
Yeah.
I've tried everything. It doesn't matter. I butt them together.
But now the picture frame detail, in order for you to do that and have it look nice, you'd have to have some sort of a board that doesn't have that gap, that groove in the side. Because I think, like you're saying, part of the reason why people do a fascia board around the edge of synthetic decking is because you've got that groove that's meant to for the hidden fasteners. Or sometimes you have like hollow,
a plowed back,
hollow boards, so that if you're at the ends of the boards, you can see right into the hollow boards. So if you're going to do a picture frame, you would, one way to possibly do a picture frame, you have to cut it, but also if you're looking at the edge of a synthetic board, sometimes they make the boards without the groove so that you can use them on the edges, or you might even be able to rip a piece of that material and fill that groove and glue it in there so that you don't see the raw edge of the board.
Speaking of, so would there be any argument for the way in which it was done? Should there have been a sealant between the fascia board and
it's going to look like heck,
weird, right?
Yeah. No, basically anytime you have...
do you think it was done incorrectly then? Just given that that's what's going to happen?
It was done in a way that's common. A lot of people don't account for material falling through the cracks and then just go ahead and, build solid blocking, solid framing, and you just have to scrape crud out of those cracks every once in a while, or when you power wash the deck. But
I would also point out that all these products are relatively new, right? And it's quite, possible these decks are both 10 years or 20 years old. So, I think it's taken people a while to figure out how to work with this stuff. And I think that stuff was overpromised by manufacturers with regard to its dimensional stability and, a bunch of other qualities. Like the trim board that Mark sent us a photo of is all wavy, and I'm sure it's because the folks who put that up, not because of the freeze-thaw cycle as he suggests, but I just don't think they put enough fasteners. If you look at the current installation guide, I want to say it's every 12 inches, and if you're used to working with wood and suddenly you're given this stuff, you don't know to fasten stuff every 12 inches. You just don't need to do that when you're talking about dimensional lumber.
Yeah, each of these different synthetic materials, or even different thicknesses of wood, they're going to have a different amount of flex. So if it's a manufactured material like this, chances are pretty good they're going to have fastening guidelines in the instructions if people read the instructions.
It's interesting. Mark, asked Dust about what to do here, and I'm flattered. But the first thing I did was ask Weyerhaeuser, right? Go to the TimberTech website and see what their details are. And interestingly, it was buried in a PDF installation guide, and I had to call technical services for them to tell me where it was. So I would tell folks, we love questions, but if you're dealing with a very specific product, go to them and ask what to do. And if they can't give you an answer,
go to a different manufacturer.
I wouldn't go there.
Yeah, we've heard stories quite a few times about. Different manufacturers probably have different levels of availability of their technical support people, but it's usually the technical support people that are going to be able to help you the most if you can't find it in the instruction manual.
I've heard from builders that it's the tech support that will make them buy a product independent of
For pros.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need product support. Absolutely. Yeah. And companies that provide good product support, boy, they have a good reputation in professionals' eyes. Simpson Strong Tie jumps to mind. Weyerhaeuser jumps to mind.
Styco.
So TimberTech, this product that Mark is talking about, is an AZEC product. To their credit, they had 8 to 5 customer technical advice Monday through Friday. Somebody picked up the phone right away. The person on the other end was competent to answer my question. She understood how decks were put together. And that's great. That's what you're paying for when you're buying a better product.
So what did she say?
She said that to leave an 1/8 inch gap if you want. She said that you have to fasten it accordingly. She also suggested the picture framing detail, and I think that's probably the best solution.
And one other point about those technical support people is some of the better companies that we know and deal with on a regular basis, that's actually how they do their research and development and product improvements. Is they search out feedback from the pros that are out there using their products.
I tell you what, I observed something in the 20 plus years I've been doing this now. Companies that listen to their customers on what they want and deliver on it are very successful. Mm-hmm. People who buy your stuff will tell you what they want and how to improve it. And if you listen to them, you will have much happier long-term customers.
That's very valid.
So folks who consume Taunton's content, please let us know what you think.
Oh, I hear it.
Yeah.
I hear about it.
Rob gets an earful.
On the very subject, boy, what a fantastic segue. Oh my God, I am on fire today.
Couldn't have planned that.
Rob, can you please tell us about the podcast survey?
Yes. So we have the podcast survey that if you go to the podcast notes page, but it's basically, you always put me on the spot. What is the URL for that?
This is the end note these days. So
but basically, just go to finehomebuilding.com/podcast, and that way you also get to see the photos and all the questions that we talk about. But in every single podcast episode page, there is a link to the survey, and by completing that survey, you'll do a number of things. You'll give us a better idea on how to make this podcast fun and interesting and useful to all of our listeners. And you will also enter for a chance to win a podcast t-shirt. We do a monthly drawing for the podcast t-shirt. And I just got the list the other day, so we'll be announcing a podcast winner next time.
Oh boy, who gets to draw the name out of the hat, Rob?
Do you want to draw the name out of the hat? Okay.
Totally. Bring it over. Pull that sucker right out of there.
I miss your anecdotal end notes, Patrick. You used to always come up with something fun. We need to.
I'm not feeling very fun lately, Kiley.
That's fair. We all could use a chuckle, though, I think.
I'm going to ask our listeners to help me out with that. It's, I look to Building Knowledge, my Facebook friends, and those of you who listen to the podcast who are on Building Knowledge, send me your stuff because that's fun. And that might be the best part of the show. Do you guys have anything to add today?
I think we've said enough, don't you?
Good.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. And I want to remind you folks, I only learned we had a podcast newsletter a few weeks ago, which seems like an incredible oversight. So if I didn't know we have one, you probably don't either. So if you go to the podcast page, you can also sign up for the podcast newsletter, and you'll get photos and interesting tidbits of all the stuff we talk about on the show. Right, Rob?
Exactly.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Stay safe and happy building.